if you're anything like me, the thing you were most scared about was yourself. And if you can get over the fear of being fearful for fearful's reason, you'll be fine. There are some good people out there. There are some good organisations. If you perhaps don't have a close friend, bring up one of the helplines and just say to somebody, I need a chat. I want to come out, and they'll listen to you.
Hello and welcome to Chaps Out with me, Grant Philpott, the podcast where I talk to men about coming out later in life and get to have the conversations I wish I'd heard when I was looking for advice. Conversations we still don't hear often enough in the UK. This podcast is for anyone navigating their own personal coming out journey wherever you may be. And remember, you are not alone. My guest today was born in Portsmouth, spent his teens growing up in Kent, then moved to London in his 20s, where he married and had 3 children before separating aged 40. He was an elected councillor for 12 years and worked as a financial controller in the city before retiring and moving to Cornwall. So I'm delighted to welcome to the Chaps Out podcast, Joel Briant. Hi, Joel.
Hi, afternoon, Joe.
Afternoon. And it's lovely to speak to you. And what we're going to talk about first off, I guess, is the age you were when you came out.
Yeah, late bloomer me, I'm afraid. Um, I was I was 50. Um, I had my 50th birthday in the March of that year. Um, Life just wasn't a particularly happy place for me at that time. I just had a conversation with myself literally in front of my bathroom mirror, and just said to myself, right, Joel, you're 50 now. What's the next chapter of your life? So I stood in front of that mirror and I just admitted to myself that I was gay. I'd almost certainly always been gay, but I'd never done anything about it. So after that chat, I went online. I signed myself up to a dating site. I didn't put a picture on. It didn't even occur to me at that point. And literally just started to look at a sort of few profiles. Eventually settled on a profile of somebody who I thought I'd really like. Really brave for me, sent him a message, really sweet message back, which was basically saying, I don't ever really talk to faceless profiles. So perhaps me being a bit naive thought, right, okay. So anyway, went out that day, got a haircut because my hair was a mess, took some photographs, didn't really know what I was doing, popped me pictures online, replied to that particular person. And he was just really nice, and he was just, well, that wasn't so bad after all. Gave me a few compliments. Um, so yeah, that was sort of my start of my journey, I suppose. I say a couple of guys, just sort of at the beginning, sort of chatting, met a couple of them. Nothing, no real stories to tell particularly, but it was, a first for me. And then the guy who I saw online, to say the one who talked about faceless profiles, just got chatting to him more. And I just found myself falling in love with this guy. So, as I say, we were just messaging. It was all gentle and light, and we sort of talked on the phone. He lived a fair bit away from me, but then we just decided to meet. So we did meet. He was going to come to mine. Perhaps don't need to put too fine a point on it. Yeah, things happened, and I don't know how to explain it really. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So this was somebody, I don't know, probably about the third or fourth person who obviously knew I was gay. And at that point, everything just sort of seemed to click. Everything seemed to be sort of aligned. And it wasn't really that long. probably talking now, beginning of December. We sort of had the conversations about, me not being out. So not in a nasty way, and I wouldn't ever have this said, but he just said to me, "Do you want me to come over tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, I definitely do." And he went, "I'm only coming over if you start to tell people." And I sort of thought, "Oh God, am I ready for all this?" And I thought at the time that was a bit harsh. But I sort of thought about it, and throughout the day, messaged me a few times, and we sort of spoke. So I went back up to my bathroom and had the conversation with myself in the mirror again. Went back downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and just thought, right, who's the first person on my list I'm going to have to speak to? And that was my sister, who was just so amazingly lovely, that all my fears and just the ridiculousness of everything, of like being so scared, that makes me emotional thinking about it. But she was just so lovely to me and just said, just it doesn't change anything. But it actually, looking back, it did change something with my sister. I have a much, much better relationship with her now, a much closer relationship with her. And we've talked over, these sort of intervening years and that. And I said to her, "Why are we closer now?" And she went, "Because you're a nice person now, and you weren't actually very nice before." And she wasn't the first person to actually sort of tell me that, to tell me that I was grumpy, miserable, didn't have time for people, didn't have patience, and yeah, just wasn't a nice person. So she was the first person I told. And then, of course, I had to go through the list of my three children. My oldest daughter, at that time, was seemingly okay with everything. She did make me a little nervous because she went, "I need to put the phone down on you now." And I'm like, "Oh, this is not going well." And I went, "Why?" And she went, "Because I need to jump in the car to come round and see you to give you a hug." So that was good, from that point of view. It's not stayed good, but that's another story. My middle daughter, she was up at university, many, many miles away, so I wasn't going to have an opportunity to see her. So I spoke with her on the phone. I think she found it difficult, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know, whatever it was, perhaps made her sort of feel uneasy. But I always felt that was a conversation that we never properly finished, from that point of view. And the last one on my list for that day, certainly, was my youngest, was my son, who I had to phone him about 4 times because young person, "Oh, did my phone ring? Oh, I didn't realise. Oh, I didn't answer." But when I eventually got hold of him, went through this big long thing and told him everything, and he just went, "Is that it?" And I went, "Yeah. Have you got any questions?" He went, "Not really." He said, "You seem happy." And then he just gave me, and I can't even remember what it was, some wonderful sort of excuse that he had to do something, but he'd catch up with me later. So, yeah, that all seemed to be okay, I suppose. And then, so this guy I was seeing, he did come over, and I recounted the tale. After that, I suppose really, I mean, there was a close friend's funeral that I had to attend literally only a couple of weeks after all this. And there was a lot of people there. How can I put it? Shall we say a lot of people perhaps from my former life, people who knew my ex-wife, who knew me, who knew my children. Some nice conversations with some people. Some brush offs from other people, but it was a funeral. It was after the funeral. It was, it wasn't a case for me to make a fuss or a scene or anything. Some unusual responses from some people. Somebody who I thought was very, very, very deeply Christian views, who probably wouldn't like the fact of what I'd now become,
Mm.
came up to me, shook my hand, had a chat with me, and then the next day I'd realised they wanted to add me as a friend on Facebook, whereas all the years I'd known them before, never wanted to be my friend on
Ah.
Facebook. So it was like, okay, that's sort of a bit interesting. So
Mm.
good and bad. There was some good interactions and some bad interactions. But for me, how can I explain it? Not the worst thing. The most surprising thing was once I'd actually said to people how it was almost like, oh, great to hear, fantastic. And then it would just be whatever else needed to be
Mm.
spoken about. And there wasn't a big fuss made. Um, I mean, I can go on to when I actually told my best friend, who was quite delayed because I didn't want to speak to him on the phone.
Mm.
I wanted to speak to him face to face. And we were due to meet because I was supposed to be best man at his wedding and we were supposed to be going for a suit fitting.
Mm.
So probably halfway out of Marks and Spencer's towards the coffee shop, I just said to him, "There's something I need to tell you, and I'm not sure it will make a difference." So I told him. He gave me a hug and just said, "Well," he said, "Well, it will make a difference." And I was like, "Why?" And he went, "Because you didn't have a +1 for the wedding." He said, "I'm assuming you have a +1 for the wedding now." And I'm like, yeah, if that's okay.
Oh, cool.
So his, wife to be, now wife, just sort of jumped in with catering arrangements and like, said, "Get me, he's a vegetarian, right? We'll sort that out." Um, so yeah, for most people, I didn't have bad experiences.
Great.
Um, so that was sort of the winter of 2016.
Right.
And as we got into 2017, and as I say, the guy I was seeing, we were just seeing more and more and more of each other. I wouldn't say he'd moved in officially,
Mm.
um, but he was there vast majority of the time. Um, and it just got to the point where we just sort of started to talk, and I was like, "Well, I'm done here. I just want to sell up, and I don't know where I want to move to next."
Mm.
Um, so we chatted, and his dream was always to come to Cornwall, a place I think I'd visited once in my life before, um, and I just thought, yeah, why not go for it?
Yeah.
So we did come to Cornwall. Not together now. Had over 9 years together. Um, Most of it was okay. Um, how can I put it? I think I've grown as a person,
Mm.
um, and perhaps when I'm ready for my next relationship, I definitely know what I don't want, what I can't have in my life, and what's going to work, and what's
Mm.
going to work for me, and what's not going to work for me.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I suppose in some ways a bit bittersweet. So find myself in Cornwall now. Don't really know anybody.
Mm.
I can't just look at it and think, oh, it ended, and it did end badly, unfortunately. But I can't just think, oh, that was a bad experience because it ended badly. I have to think, no, I do have to take the positive,
Mm.
and the good that came from it. And I have to look at the harsh bits that came out of it as well. And, part of that will be my relationship with my children, which is pretty non-existent now. Probably because they thought I put him first, which I did, because I
Mm.
just thought, well, my children, you're adults, and this has got to be my primary relationship.
Mm.
I'm 50, moved down to Cornwall, new place for me, new place for him, new start.
Well, I'm sorry
So,
to hear that, but I guess that's one of
yeah,
those mistakes. Whether you're gay or not, it can sometimes you go tunnel vision, and you sort of forget everybody else, don't you? And that can happen. I must
yeah,
admit that's happened to me in the past. But let's get back to like so.
mm.
But growing up and that, you always kind of suspected that you might be gay or bi or.
No, I never thought I was bi. Never
No.
thought that at all. Probably tried to convince myself.
Mm,
Um, I suppose growing up as a child with an unusual first name, let's put it that way. All the
mm,
kids in my class were called Stephen and Paul and Barry and Mark and those sort of names and
mm,
David. They were the kids I sort of grew up with.
mm,
Me was the odd one with the odd name.
mm,
Um, and probably as a child, no, not probably, no, I did as a child. I always struggled what I call to make friends. I might have one really close friend, and that kid would move away, and I might get another really close friend. But
mm,
I was never one to be surrounded, with lots and lots of friends. I just think I always felt different to other people. What other boys were interested in were not always the things I was interested in. I mean,
mm.
I don't mean that, I wanted to play with my sister's Cindy dolls. I didn't. I mean, I remember getting into trouble for snapping one of their heads off, but that was another story. Um, yeah, I did have action men and toy cars and things as a kid, but I just think I always felt different. And going into secondary school, that was in Portsmouth at the time, and I think a lot of parts of the country, kids go off to secondary school when they're 11. When I was living there, you didn't go to secondary school. I think I was 13. So that would have been whatever term at
Mm,
school. Um, and in secondary school, I just felt more different to sort of other people. Um, I can remember particularly, it'll never leave my mind, the day when we'd had sports and everyone was back in the changing rooms. And this particular boy in my class decided, right, he was going into the shower with absolutely nothing on, and my eyes nearly bulged out of my head. Um, I can remember that, and I was either still 12 or just coming up to 13.
mm,
Because my mother had remarried the year before, and so we, as in like a new family, relocated to Kent, and then so that's when I was like 13, coming up 14, and again I started a new school.
mm,
Yeah, probably not my tribe. I would say most of the kids in my class, not really my sort of people.
mm,
I felt excluded. They all had friendship groups because they'd all grown up and known each other. I spoke different to them because I was from Portsmouth
mm.
with three F's at the end. And they all sounded like they were farmers, from my point of view anyway, this sort of Kentish sort of dialect. Um, but yeah, again, at school, I just felt different to other people.
Mm,
Um, I can just remember an event. I think I was 15 and I went to some sort of roller skating disco, and there was a few kids in my school there. Um, and again, I just sort of felt different. I was just sort of there for the music, watching some of the people skate round. Some of the guys who were skating round, I was like, oh my God, he can skate backwards. And they were looking at other things of interest to them. So yeah, I've always known, um, but I've always been too scared to actually admit it to myself. And until
mm.
I could admit it to myself, there's no way I was going to admit it to anybody else. So I didn't. Um, so I did oh, let's go and get married. Is it because it's what you want? No. But do you want to have children? Yeah. And, that's what you did in my day, probably, if you wanted to have children. My mother, I don't have any relationship at all with,
No.
since, God, nothing to do with me being gay. I hadn't even come out at that point. It was like years before. She just divorced my dad, and it just seemed to get very nasty. But
Uh,
yeah, if I look back at my childhood, I'd certainly say my mother was toxic, homophobic. I can remember in my teens telling me, why are you listening to that George Michael? You know, why would you want to listen to his music? He's one of those queers, isn't he? You know, and any comment, someone like Elton John would come on the TV and she's got an opinion. I did find it really, really ironic and quite laughable, actually, because my mother, during many years of her life, had gone to see so many Barry Manilow concerts, and she'd had so many signed CDs and pictures and bits and pieces and all that. And I remember telling her years and years and years ago, well, everyone knows he's gay. No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. Well, of course, as soon as he comes out as gay, well, she's not a fan anymore. And I just think, oh, how sad. How sad. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, somebody brings out a bit of record tomorrow and I think, oh, I like that. And I think, oh, he's a handsome chap. And then you find out he's straight. Well, you don't just burn the CD if you've bought it or stop listening to it, do you? I mean, you just, you just get on with your life. So,
yeah.
So, I suppose your question, fear of what other people would think, fear of what my family would think, and just overthought absolutely everything. To the point of like, well, you can't tell people because, I'd probably lose my job and this wouldn't happen and that wouldn't happen. And it's just a load of old nonsense that I got into my head and convinced myself. As once you tell one person and it goes well, you're quite happy to tell a second person. If that goes badly, it wasn't for me, oh, I can't tell anybody else. It was like, oh, well, move on to the next one and let's hope this is a good experience. So that's just what I did. And if people don't like it, I really don't care. If somebody's got a problem with it, well, I toyed with it for 50 years. So if I've toyed with it for 50 years, and I came out and it's right for me and I was a much happier person and I'm glad I did it, well then good. And if someone doesn't like it, well, it's their problem, and I'm not going to waste my time with people who, want to be negative and toxic. If you want to be negative and toxic, fine, go and do it to somebody else, but you're not doing it with me in your life because I won't have you in my life. And if people think that's harsh, well, it's harsh. My mother was 80 last year. Well, I didn't send her a card because I don't exist as far as she's concerned. She never, talks about me, apparently. I have a really good relationship with my sister who has a relationship with her mother, but it doesn't stop us having a relationship together either. So, I've got a younger brother as well, bit more of a bursting Christmas card exchanging sort of relationship. I didn't actually ever tell him. I just said to my sister, "Oh, you couldn't tell, my brother for me." She went, "Yeah, I'm seeing him tomorrow." I just left that one to her, but that was all fine as well. So,
That's
yeah.
interesting. So you let her tell your news. You were happy to do that.
Yeah, just because it was easier, because she's like, oh, I'm seeing him the next day, blah, 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 blah. And my brother-in-law, I said to her, will you tell Graham for me? She went, yeah, of course I can. And after a couple of days, I messaged her and I said, what happened? She went, what? What happened with Graham? And she's like, I've no idea. What did happen with him? And I said, did you tell him? And she's like, oh, yeah, it's fine. And it was just like there was nothing to report. And yet I was sort of fretting.
When you started to come and sort of accept yourself, that was almost immediately when you sort of looked at yourself in the mirror. That was at the moment when you kind of went and you sort of have a serious word.
I had a serious chat myself and just thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that I'm this happy person who's content with my life and I'm single and there's only me in it. I was like, well, if I'm going to do something about it, there's no way I thought I could do something about it and just sort of be a closeted person. I did consider it, albeit very briefly, and just thought, I don't want to do that. On the other hand, I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't suddenly, getting a 20-foot banner printed and, draping it over the front of my house or nothing. I don't actually think I ever told my neighbours. I never actually said to them, oh, by the way, I'm gay. I think they just sort of worked it out when You know, my ex's car was there for one night, and then it was two, and then it was three, and then it was just practically there permanently. So, coming to Cornwall, say with my ex, because you know, and I realise now all the mistakes that were made, blah 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 blah. But the fact that we just saw each other as the only people we needed, so I didn't meet anybody new. But also, whereas I used to sort of put things on my Facebook account, I just stopped doing that. So I seemed to sort of disappear from the world, probably for like 7, 8 years or
Mm.
something. Um, and it was when my very best friend, he came to stay with me, he said, you just need to start posting a few things. And I went, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, what are you going to do? Ring some of these people up who were in your lives from like 7, 8 years ago. He said, what? So I'll go and tap on their window and go, oh,
Mm.
sorry, I've ignored you, but
Mm.
I was madly in love with a narcissist, and so there was no room for anybody else. He said, you're not going to do that. He said, so just gently tap on their window with a few social media posts and
Mm.
that. So I thought, well, I've got no idea what to do. So he gave me a very quick lesson. Look, you can tag somebody and put a bit
Mm.
of music and say where you are. So I did a bit of that. Um, and then just through one of the things I posted, because of my politics, I got elected to the LGBTQI officer for my constituency party.
Mm.
Our MP sort of like elbowed me to the front and a few others. I just posted the fact that I'd been elected to that, and I just put um, probably a lot of my Facebook contacts. I didn't put friends. I put don't actually probably realise I'm gay.
Mm.
Not that it's a big thing, but you know, for the avoidance of doubt, etc., etc. And again, I had some absolutely lovely, lovely messages back from people from, you know, some of them what I would call Facebook friends because they were like former colleagues in sort of places I'd work and that, you know, and
Mm.
you'd sort of follow their life, but I'd never posted anything about mine.
Mm.
So I actually had some really nice messages from people and a few what I call like reconnections with
Mm.
people. You know, a couple of people like, why is your phone number not in my phone? You know, let's sort of sort that one out.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you're right. Most of it isn't a big thing for anybody, you know, who
Mm.
you're drawn to. People,
Mm.
I just find people really uninterested. Um, and all my ridiculous fears over the years was always about what other people would
Mm.
think. And I would just say to anybody, you know, if you're thinking of coming out, I can't promise the next person who does it's going to have a great experience. No
Mm.
one can promise that, but I can assure people being afraid of yourself is the worst thing you can do. Once I admitted to myself, it was relatively easy to tell everybody else, but that was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do was just to look at myself in the mirror and go, Joel, you're gay, you fancy men, you know, and you can deny it all for all, you know, carry on denying it, but it's not going to make any difference. You know, that feeling inside, you know, how can you explain it? That romantic feeling inside when you see somebody and you're sort of, you know, building a life with somebody in your head thinking, oh, he's nice and this could happen and that could
Mm.
happen, you know, and before long, but I mean, I'm a Piscean, so I have a romantic nature anyway, ridiculous. But before long, you're going through an episode of Little House on the Prairie in your own mind of how happy you could be, and then that fear of like, oh, but I can't do that because I'm too scared takes over. So you just go back to your old ways. And now I don't. How can I explain it? I never wake up in the morning and think I'm gay. I don't. I just wake up in the morning now.
Mm.
I don't wake up and sort of think, oh, how's today going to go? And what if something awkward happens today? And if somebody says, oh, you bringing anybody to the office dinner or party or this sort of thing, you just sort of think, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I mean, not that
Mm.
now I don't work, but just think I'm less interested in what I call the froth and the nonsense
Mm.
about how everybody is going to have this very strong opinion about what I'm doing. And I just came to the realization 99.9999999999999% of the world is never going to be that interested in who I'm kissing, who I'm sleeping with, what I'm laughing at, and what I'm doing. So I stopped worrying about them.
Lovely. That's great. So you're feeling a lot more strong and confident, I guess, in yourself since coming out.
Yeah, but it's almost like I've done it twice now. I did it when I was 50, and then I skipped down into Cornwall with my
Mm,
relationship, and then didn't tell anybody. Half the people, that I knew, I never even told I'd particularly moved to Cornwall. I just sort of let them know. So it wasn't until last year I just thought, no, everybody in my life who's connected to me on, I don't know, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, I don't want anybody to not know.
mm,
Not because I need to rush and tell them all, but
mm.
I just need them to know. So if they have a problem, then they won't connect with me, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Um, but it's just about sort of being honest.
It will lighten your load. I mean, I felt a
Yeah.
hell of a lot lighter after coming out.
Yeah, I think I said to you earlier. I mean, to me, it was just like, oh wow, the world's in colour, and it wasn't before.
Exactly the
Uh,
same as me. I describe it as Dorothy opening the door
yeah,
to the Oz. That's how it was in my
yes,
head.
yes. I mean, well, one of the things I did, I mean, last year, it was like, oh, I'm going to do this, so I set up my Spotify account,
Mm,
and it's like, oh, basically anything I've ever liked, if I can hum a tune to it into an app, it will find it for
mm,
me. Songs I've liked. And it was just like, that's going on my playlist. I've always liked that song. Um, I remember back in 2006. 2006, I was 40, and that was it. Me and my wife, that was
mm,
definitely finished. And I went to Australia. And what a perfect opportunity at that point would have been to have come out, and I didn't. It took me another 10 years. But
mm,
I do remember in Australia, I bought an iPod, and I found it a little while ago. So that goes back to sort of 2006 and sort of going forward. And I looked at the music on there, and a lot of it is now on my
mm,
Spotify. But there's a hell of a lot of things on my Spotify I wouldn't have dared to put on my iPod at the time,
mm,
because that was seen as all bit camp or a bit
mm.
gay or a bit this or a bit that. And now I'm like, oh, lovely tune, fabulous.
Give
Add
me an
it to me
example.
Spotify. Um, oh, just stuff like, I don't know, like Gloria Gaynor, I am what I
Oh,
am. I mean, I know all the words to it. Everyone knows all the words to it. But that wouldn't have been something I would have played on my iPod, because it would be
mm,
like, well, why would you have that on your iPods?
mm.
Because the seemingly heterosexual men wouldn't have things like that on their sort of iPod.
There was so much music by gay artists, and they were out and proud. And I
Mm.
listened to the Frankie Goes to Hollywood album a lot. I know that in every breath of that, in Inside Out, and like Bronski Beat.
Yeah, Small Town Boy. I think that was 1984,
Mm,
which would have been the year when I was 18.
hmm
Probably common for most people. I was going to the clubs from probably the age of about 16 or late 15 onward, and getting in them. Yeah, so you were sort of going clubbing. That would come on, the DJ would put that on, and the dance floor would fill.
mm,
And I'm talking of very straight clubs in in that sort of time, and everyone would be dancing, and yet I'd be probably, for me, it was like, I'm listening to the words of this song, and this actually resonates. Everyone else is just hearing the tune and dancing to it, but I don't think they're actually listening to the
mm.
words. Um, because I can just, see faces of people on the dance floor that if I probably had to hedge my bets now, I'd probably say, yeah, you was probably quite a homophobic type of person. And yet they're strutting their stuff off on the dance floor to Jimmy Somerville, talking about his own personal angst and that of his band members, and yet they take something completely different from that song. But yeah, that's one that sits on my Spotify now that would never have appeared on my list of music in those times, because you probably wouldn't be best suited to like somebody like that, because you might give the game away about yourself, or someone's going to say, well, why do you like them then? So I can remember watching the video like it was yesterday. So yeah, that would definitely be something I would just recommend to people to listen. Listen to it and get the lyrics up and read through the lyrics, because it's a very, very, very powerful song. So yeah, sort of coming out, as I did when I was 50, was a version of me that did come out, but it wasn't the full version of me. Because I went very quickly into this long-term relationship that, I am your partner, you are my partner, we do this, we do that, we do the other, we make joint decisions, we go shopping together, did all those things like a proper married couple, but still wasn't actually me. Just friends have said to me, since he sort of disappeared and that, they said, you need to sort of sort your house out, reclaim your house for the things that you like and you did. And I have started to do that. I've gone in the garage and found boxes of books and CDs and DVDs and stuff like that. All sorts of stuff in there, that I'm like, oh yeah, I really like that film. And things that have popped into my head recently, I'm like, right, when I get 5 minutes, I'll pop on eBay or Amazon, and I'm going to rebuy myself. I'm going to buy myself a copy of that DVD, because I wouldn't have bought it at the time. And that could be, I don't know, a film. I don't know, My Beautiful Laundrette from the mid-80s to, I don't know, Brokeback Mountain. Wouldn't have watched any of those in any company with anybody else, because you just wouldn't. And it wasn't until last year that I'd ever been to a Pride event. Never been to one in my life, because my ex, there was always an excuse not to go to one. So I went to a very, 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 very low level one, just in my county, right at the last knockings when there wasn't going to be anything else. And I just thought, no, I actually I had a decent day that day. So going into 2026, I'm like, right, which ones am I going to visit next year? Do you know what I mean? And I will. And I won't be the guy at the front, I won't be the one with silver shorts and sequins on. But I don't want to be the guy who's right at the back also, because that probably wouldn't be. Somewhere in the middle for diddle is probably where I think I need to sort of be in that. And if I have to get myself a big flag to make myself visible, well, that's what I'm going to do.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, have you got any kind of words of advice, anything that you'd sort of pass on, that you'd like to pass on for anyone who's maybe struggling or in the process of, thinking of coming out?
Oh, I think if somebody, how can I put it? If somebody in my late teens, early 20s had probably just sat down with me and said, I know. And I'd be like, what do you know? And they're like, I know. And they'd just said, it'll all be fine. Then I wouldn't have been fearful for all the years I was. So for me, really, the message to impart on somebody if they're having those difficulties is, if you're anything like me, the thing you were most scared about was yourself. And if you can get over the fear of being fearful for fearful's reason, you'll be fine. There are some good people out there. There are some good organisations. If you perhaps don't have a close friend, bring up one of the helplines and just say to somebody, I need a chat. I want to come out, and they'll listen to you. Yeah, just don't be scared of yourself. That's the worst person you can be scared of is yourself. Because really, that person, your inner you, really, that inner person should have your best interests at heart. So, yeah, that's what I'd say to anybody nowadays, anyway.
It's great to hear. Well, I think we can start to wrap up, but I did mention to you before actually that we're going to do a little bit of an extra podcast where you're going to
Yeah,
talk about a bit of
yeah.
culture that do you want to recommend to us. So, what are you going to be talking about in Chaps Out Culture?
It's something that I've spoken to you already about. It's something that's made me really think about it, and that is the film My Beautiful Laundrette. Um, the first time I ever saw that film, how can I explain it? Obviously, culturally, you've got an Indian character, and you've got somebody who looks like they should be on some sort of like far right march or
Mm,
something. But I remember watching that film thinking, My Beautiful Laundrette, what a beautiful, beautiful story.
lovely. Well, that's obviously a big film. So, thanks once again, Joel, so much for you coming on, and it's been lovely having a conversation with you. And
Absolute pleasure. Absolute
thank you very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Chaps Out, and to Joel for being so open and honest. His story showed us that coming out isn't always a single moment. It can be a process of growing into yourself over time. What stayed with me most was when Joel said the worst person to be scared of is yourself, and how freeing it was to realise that 99.9% of the world isn't that interested, and that's okay. 9 years on, Joel is still growing stronger, showing us that even through mistakes and setbacks, we can keep moving closer to our true selves. It's not a race, but a journey to be taken in your own time, and that it's never too late to choose honesty, to choose yourself, and to grow into the real you. If this conversation resonated with you, remember, you are not alone. And please subscribe to Chaps Out wherever you listen so you never miss an episode, along with episodes of our companion podcast, Chaps Out Culture. And please follow us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And if you like what we're doing, you can donate on the link in the bio. Your support will help with the running costs and keep these conversations flowing. And if you grew up in the UK and came out later in life and have an inspiring story you'd like to share, please email chapsoutpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. Take care.